ability. Yeah, that's it. And how you immediately identify that I'm a sergeant major and that you're frightened of me. Is that what we're saying? And that internal sense of discipline that just oozes through the speakers and makes you feel compelled to do everything that I say. Yeah. Hi. Welcome, Anastasia. We don't make comparisons about which group is better, just saying. Okay, so lie on the floor. And I'll preface this series, this is the Head Circle series, by saying this is not a series that I would teach to people who are new to Feldenkrais. And we can talk about that afterwards. However, there are elements of it, of course, that you could. Maybe that would be a nice exercise that we could do is what elements could you take out of it? In fact, let's do that. I've just had this, if this stresses you in terms of out of hours activities, so I can give you some class time to do it. But we could take any of these ATMs this week, maybe we'll do it next week, and turn any one of them into what Larry Goldfarb calls a 3-minute miracle. Now, some classic ATMs lend themselves more to transforming into a 3-minute miracle than others, but it's a really good exercise about what are the kind of, what's the pithiness? Pithy meaning, what's the essential, some really core pithy instructions in this ATM. And it's not to say that the rest of the instructions are padding, but in a way they are. They're sort of, they're more variations to ensure that more and more people gain some benefit from the lesson. But what are the pith instructions, as it were? The sort of pared down to its absolute bare bones that you could then do as a 3-minute miracle. And maybe we've talked about that Larry's idea of a 3-minute miracle is that, when you're sitting at dinner with somebody and they say, what is this Feldenkrais stuff? And you're tempted to go into a half-hour monologue, which bores them shitless. It almost never works, does it? Have you noticed that talking about Feldenkrais almost never lands well? However, if you've got the courage, and it takes a bit of courage to say, okay, look, it's very experiential. So try this. Now, if you're in a really posh Melbourne restaurant where everybody's, completely disappeared up their own asses and you can't do things like this, value judgment about snobby Melbourne restaurants. Just had to get one in. I'll stop now. But let's say you were in somewhere where you could do that and you could just do a little quiet 3-minute ATM in a chair in a restaurant or at a dinner, in someone's dining room or whatever. So it's quite an interesting thing. Larry's really good at it. I've seen Larry do it. Last time he was teaching here, he got the students to do it, and that's why I was saying about the snobby Melbourne restaurants, because someone actually did it in one of those little groovy bistro, I'm going to charge you $40 for half a scallop restaurants in the middle of Melbourne. So it can be done. Okay. All right. So you're lying on the floor, and now I've given you time to settle on the floor by doing a bit of patter. Wisdom. That was patter. I made no claim about that being wisdom, but it's patter. Now, because you are experienced being on the floor, you probably listened to me a little bit, and you also paid attention to yourself. Imagine if this was your first ATM and you'd never laid on the floor like this. You don't know what to do on the floor. So what did you do automatically lying on the floor? You started to scan yourself. You started to notice which bits maybe were tense and holding, which bits were uncomfortable, which bits were comfortable. and you probably even started doing a bit of a scan. The general public won't do any of that. They'll be lying on the floor, possibly feeling quite vulnerable, because lying on your back on the floor with it semi-dark and somebody talking, you don't know what anybody else is doing because you can't see them because you're on the floor, and you don't know what I'm doing and what I'm looking at. You don't know what I'm judging you for, so you feel quite vulnerable. Can you catapult yourself back to your first ever ATM? People, just hands up, who felt a bit vulnerable when you're first asked to lie on your back on the floor? Yep, 1, 2, 3. Oh, you're just a bunch of shameless hussies. Okay, so not many of you. It's just me projecting then. I did. And I see people, you know, kind of, when you first ask someone to lie on the floor and they don't know what to expect, they'll pop their heads up and look around to see if they're lying on the floor like everybody else is, seeing what everybody else is. You see these little periscope heads pop up and look around. Okay. Now, this is me going meta again. So if it gets too much, I'll stop and just get back into the lesson. So you've had a few moments to notice your contact with the floor. And in particular, I'd like you to pay attention to the length of the spine. So for you, you've got a bit of an understanding experientially and intellectually about the spine now. So your first sort of internal sense of the spine, do you see your spine? Do you feel your spine? Which part is more spine than the other? So for a lot of people, it might be where you have pain. That part of your spine might be very noticeable in your self-image. So is your spine, is it inclusive of the coccyx and the sacrum? So right down the bottom, at the back of your pelvis. Is it inclusive of the 5 lumbar vertebrae? Is it inclusive of the 12 thoracic vertebrae? And the 7 cervical vertebrae? So the neck, the chest, the small of the back, and the back of the pelvis. So I can say lumbar vertebrae and cervical, and you know what I'm talking about. But if you use that language with the general public, they won't necessarily know what you're talking about. So you have to back translate into real English, not anatomical. And of those sort of 4, technically 5 sections, what's the length of the cervical vertebrae? So from the base of the skull to the top of the shoulders at the back. What's the length and the shape of it? The arch of it. So for most people, it's an arch. And then roughly speaking, so the length of the thoracic, so from the end of the cervical, so the back at the top of the shoulders there, down to where the ribs sort of end, thoracic. Is that length a little bit less clear or a little bit more clear? And what's the configuration? What's the shape of that? Is it equally clear along the whole length of it, or is there bits that sort of get more or less fuzzy? Remembering that we're probably, in a way, more interested in the fuzzy bits than the clear bits. We love them all equally. And then the lumbar spine, so from where the ribs stop coming from the vertebrae. So there's 5. What's the length of that? That section between the bottom of the ribs and the top of the pelvis, or the top of the sacrum. Some of you may have 6. And it has a length. Does it also have a shape, an arch? And what's the nature of that arch? Flat, high, long, acute? What's your sense of it? And then the sacrum, which is made up of fused vertebrae. What's the length of your sacrum? Your internal sense. So again, for the public, asking them what's the length of the sacrum, the little head periscopes will pop up and say, oh, I think it's about 5 centimeters. So you have to quietly say, oh, excellent, thank you. Now, what's your internal sense of it? It's sort of a sense answer. How do you explain that the answer that you're looking for is an approximation in their mind of what it feels like? What does the length? How do they sense the length of the spine? And actually, the accuracy is kind of not the point. It's the ease with which you can sense it. And then, can you remember that sense? Because we're going to compare it later. Not that we're expecting the length of your sacrum to change. That would be a disaster. But anyway, sense your coccyx. That might be a little bit lost to you somewhere in the sort of right down at the base of the gluteal cleft, that sort of gap in your buttocks. You can get a bit sort of vague down there, or maybe not. If you've broken your coccyx, it's in no way vague at all. So everybody's experience will be different about the clarity, depending on their experience, the nature of their experience. And then spend just a moment sensing the length of the spine again, from the base of the skull all the way to the coccyx. And what's the length of the spine in relation to the length of each leg? Is it more or less? Again, if you're kind of hung up on accuracy, you might want to look, but what is your internal sense? That your spine is longer than your right leg or your left leg, or shorter? What about the length of your spine in comparison to the length of your right arm or the left arm? What about the length of your spine and the length of your face? How many faces could you fit along the length of your spine? That's weird. And if you were, Leonardo da Vinci could plot it all out on the Petruvian Man, the guy in the circle. Now roll up to sitting. And so there's a movement of yourself physically. And notice the movement of your attention in that moment of coming up to sitting. And if you missed it, go back down to lying and come back up again. And can you notice where your attention goes? To what parts of you? Is there a change in the quality of your attention? So it could be to other body parts, but it could be to the orientation in the room or to other people. And I think one of the papers that Zoran asked you to talk about in the last online series was about the influence of the environment. And therefore, and our spatial organisation in the environment impacts on our attention, our organisation. So notice that happens. So when you ask people in ATM to sit up, chances are this will happen. And please sit with your legs crossed. So as a teacher, I'm going to go meta a bit. It's quite confronting when you're used to talking to a group of people lying down on their back. They're in their own space, you know, and they've really gone internal. They're really introspective. And look at you all now. Ding! Periscopes are you know, it's not just lifting your head up. You are all up in the environment, and you're all paying attention to me. So it's a very different teacher student dynamic. It's very different. So you need to be ready for that. Like it's, you know, it's pulling focus. You're all focused on me now, and I don't want you to be. I want you to pull focus back to yourself. So I'll ask you to close your eyes. If you feel comfortable sitting up, close your eyes. So, this is what you might need to do with the public class, because they'll want to extrovert a bit now. They want to pay attention because they're good students. They've been through school and they know that when the teacher says sit up, you sit up straight and you cross your legs and you pay attention. Eyes front, hands on laps, blah, blah, blah. So you're doing a lot of cultural expectation as soon as people sit up. Yep. Okay. Now sit with your hands behind you so that you're leaning on your hands and your fingers are facing forward. And maybe at some point I want you to experience it first, then we'll talk about why we've got this set up. I can find a place where you can have a little bit of weight on your hands, but that's sustainable. So if your hands are right back, try everybody putting your hands way back behind you, fingers facing forward, facing towards your feet. That's it. And move your hands way back and feel the difference, the demand difference with your hands way back, and then have them closer to your hip joints. And find a place where they take a little bit of weight, but not the weight that's going to become problematic, troublesome. You can do fists if you want. So this is now the adaptation stuff. If people are really, when do you let people adapt? This is a question. I'm going meta again. Do you ask them to just try first if it really hurts? Or do you just get them to have their hands a little bit closer to their hips so they're not taking too much weight? So the hands are just there. Or you could ask them to put a little bit of something underneath the heel of their hand first. And why does that help? If you have a little bit of something under the heel of your hand, it means, so for most people, if they don't like this position of having their hands behind and their fingers forward, it's because they don't like the break in the wrist, the big extension demand on the wrist. So you take a bit of the extension demand off by putting something under the heel of the hand, so that crease, that bend in the wrist isn't as extreme. Yeah. Now, if you have your fists there, that's okay, but I'll ask you to try both, so that you can make a decision about whether that adaptation is acceptable or not. And that's actually what you're thinking about with your students. How important is this configuration to the experience? Can we compromise or not? Is it not compromisable? And we can talk about that afterwards. Okay, so now you've been all in that position way too long. So cross your legs, but now eyes closed and lean on those hands a little bit. However, they don't have to take weight. I'm just giving you that little heads up now because you've been there too long. And bring your right shoulder a little bit forwards and then back to where it was. And if you're crossing your knees is really uncomfortable, and then have them whichever way is comfortable, maybe out long or feet together. That's a compromise. Just understand that's fine, just so long as your legs aren't particularly important at this point. And your right shoulder comes forward and then goes back to the front, and you keep doing that. And what happens to your attention? So you can't assume that people know what to do with that instruction. So I'm going to guide you about possible places where your attention could go. So when I say right shoulder, what else moves? Do you feel any movement in the shoulder blade? Yes, you have to. That's a subtext. Is there any movement in the spine, in the thoracic spine, in the lumbar spine? Does it influence where your head is, where your head goes, where your eyes go? Does it influence what's making the most contact with the ground? So underneath your buttocks and underneath your hands. Does it influence your breath? What happens in your left shoulder? And of course, you can rest your hands when you need to. And so again, what I'm noticing is when people need to rest, whether they are doing it spontaneously or not. So that's how I'm pacing this. And the thing is, you won't know when they need a rest, particularly. You're guessing, because you have to let go of any conceit that you're going to really understand somebody else's experience. You can only ever guess. This is a social situation. You can only guess. And half the time you're projecting your own thing on them anyway. So you have to know what's your projection and what's their reality. You won't necessarily. So come back. If you've had a rest, just come back to that place where your hands can be behind you, fingers forward, comfortably. And now as you bring your right shoulder forward and it comes back, continue the movement backwards. And then keep going, bringing your shoulder forwards, then forwards as far as is comfortable, and then back to the front, and the shoulder continues to go backwards. And there's so many things to notice about this movement. So again, I'll give you a couple. So is the distance that it goes forward the same as the distance it goes backwards? And as you move the right shoulder backwards, because hopefully you're fairly clear now on what moves elsewhere in you as your shoulder comes forward. What's the influence on the rest of your body as your right shoulder goes backwards? And in particular, what's happening in the other shoulder, in the shoulder joint, in the shoulder girdle, so the blade, the shoulder blade, the scapula that sits on the chest wall. What's happening in the spine? What's happening at the base of the ribs? That point where the thoracic spine becomes the lumbar spine and either side. In your head and your eyes. So if I go meta again, what am I using to pace myself? I've got a few people, and I can't even tell you who they are really, because it's probably, I'm trying to track all of you, is that I'm watching your pace, and I'm watching, and I'm kind of projecting where your attention might be. And I'm thinking about, though, I'm sending my attention to those parts as I'm talking to you. Okay, so I'm using the pace of the room in a sense. Now, sometimes we have to, if people are going too slow, you might have to pick it up a bit. You can't use, the room can't take charge in that sense. People are going too fast, you have to calibrate them down. But you get it, you actually entrain. There's an entrainment or a resonance between you and the students, where you start kind of, vibrating in the same frequency, as it were. Yep. So you pick a few exemplars in the room. Not the best students, I'm not saying that at all, but what's the kind of common pacing, and you can use that. And have a rest in lying. And I'm saying that because somebody already has, and I'm sick of looking at you and I want to have a break. If I'm really honest, yeah, I just want you to have a little rest, and I want to have a rest. So it's my pacing as well. I'm part of this system. How are you going with the meta thing? Is it driving you crackers? Okay, just so long as you know that I wouldn't do this in public. This is not, I don't explain my thought processes to the public. They don't need to know. And what's the influence of that small movement of the right shoulder going forwards and back, and then backwards and forwards? Has it made a difference to the way you sense your spine? So all your spine has been doing is rotating maybe a little bit, turning forwards and backwards. What does turning have any influence on your sense of length? And again, with the public, you need to make it absolutely clear and find that there is no right or wrong answer, because they will be desperately looking for a right or a wrong answer, because they're good students, and that's the way classrooms are. Teachers ask a question and they're either right or they're wrong. And this is the culture that we are not wanting to evoke. We're wanting to evoke a culture where it's attempting to find an answer that's the important thing. The answer is of interest in terms of what question it then leads to. However, it's not going to be evaluated for right or wrong, because it's simply your experience in the moment. And the more experiences you have where the answer keeps changing means that you no longer get so hung up on it being right or wrong, because if it keeps changing, how can it possibly be right or wrong? It is what it is in that moment. Okay, so that's the kind of learning environment that we're setting up. Okay, come back up to sitting. Okay, let's go a little bit meta. Why has he got his hands? These are adapted series of lessons from a training in Strasbourg years ago. Why are the arms? Why are the hands behind? So do that move. This is not the ATM. This is me talking to ATM teachers. Don't lean on your hands. Just sit and bring your right shoulder forwards and backwards, as if it's an ATM. Now, you don't necessarily know the full story because you've only done one movement, but what's the difference? Why is the hand anchored behind anyway? And then compare the two. So what does that position of the hands behind afford you? What does it offer you to experience that's different if your hands are just free ranging? Your arms aren't grounded. Yeah. So I'll say it again for the tape. What Philip is saying is that with the hands not grounded on the ground as such, it's you get a no. I've forgotten what you said. Yeah, the impact on rotation and the integration into the spine. Absolutely. So in fact, the hand being on the ground is a constraint. And it immediately shunts the movement more into the spine rotating, and possibly that you can get an easier sense of the scapula sliding on the chest wall. And then once the scapula has slid a bit, then you start rotating in the spine. So as Philippa said, it integrates, it connects more rapidly into the spine than if you are just sitting with your arms free. So the constraint forces the movement to become clearer somewhere else. Now, of course, when you know that, it doesn't matter where your arms are, you can still feel that. But that's the point. That's the trickiness of an ATM lesson, is that we put in these constraints to make it more obvious, so that in regular positions you can feel it, because we've kind of shone that torch on it a bit more. Now, the reason why the fingers are forward will become apparent sort of throughout the series, but it means that what that offers you is that your weight can go, is if you put your fingers back, feel how your elbows lock in. I'll just give you the answer just because otherwise we'll be here forever. Whereas if your fingers are forward, then your weight shift forwards and backwards is easier because your elbows can bend. And so let's just say maybe the lesson is going to have a little bit more opportunity for your weight to shift more easily, not only left and right for the twisting, but forwards and backwards. Okay? So there's a reason for it. So therefore, if you understand the reason for these things, then you can decide, well, do I let people adapt or not? So the compromising thing is that you don't let people have their fingers pointing backwards, because that's a bit of a non-negotiable. However, they could have their fingers at their sides for now, so just here, right? They don't have to. Now, what's the difference between having your hands by your sides as behind you? What happens to the shape of your spine? It's not impossible to do it. So this is my interpretation, is that people's wrists are really, and knowing, because I know where these lessons are going, this is an okay adaptation to have it here. And it's an okay adaptation to have the heels of your hands much higher on some padding, if that extreme extension in the wrists is a problem. With being on the fists, if we're going to take our weight backwards, that's not going to work for some people. So eventually there'll have to be a compromise. But for this movement of just the turning, it's okay, but it's not going to work if we're going to take our weight back. People can find a way around it, but it's okay for now. I'm kind of prepared to tolerate it for now. Yep. All right. Is that clear about how I'm adapting? All right. So now it's really taken you out of the experience. So come back to your legs crossed, and your hands as you can tolerate, and begin to bring your left shoulder forwards and then back to the front. So don't go beyond your sort of starting position, just forwards and back. And what do you remember of the right shoulder coming forwards and back? And how do you compare from a kinesthetic memory point of view, if it's the same or if it's different? I remember to broaden your attention. So your attention would have gone kind of habitually to one spot. Where was that one spot? Was it the front of the shoulder? Was it the back of the shoulder? Is it your eyes? Is it your head? And when I say shoulder, what's the point that you think of moving first? What is shoulder? Think about the shoulder blade, the ribs at the front of the chest, the ribs at the back of the chest. What's the sequence? Is the sequence the same going forwards as going backwards? And in your own time, obviously resting when you need to, take the left shoulder back so that you do the full arc, the left shoulder coming forwards and then back to the start, and then keeping on going backwards and then forwards. If we had little dots on you, like in a 3D analysis, which dot would move the furthest? Is it the dot that's on the point of the shoulder? Or is the dot on your nose? Or the dot on the back of your skull? Or the bottom of your sternum? Was there a dot that wouldn't move? What's happening in your eyes and your breath? And leave it and rest in sitting, rest in some other place, just rest. So I'll give you a little, at this point, this is in the Strasbourg training, so it's not a public workshop. And Larry's teaching, and he goes into Larry does a lot of teaching in the breaks in ATM. He does it a lot. And I used to do it a lot. And then I can't remember who, some trainer said, try not doing it. So I can teach, you can do it both ways. So this is getting to your question, Sue. Do you talk a lot in the breaks or not? Depends is the answer. Always, it depends. Incontinence pads for women is always the answer to every question. Depends. If you've got a long, luxurious hour and a half, you can talk a lot. If they're a new class, you can go through the rules in the break. And generally speaking, the public don't like silences when they don't know what the silence is for. If you've got a well-trained class, they're very happy to lie there in silence and notice what they notice or have a rest, because they understand what the rules are and they feel safe in that space. If they don't, lying down in silence will make them feel uncomfortable. So you just need to put a little bit of something in there, and it's a golden opportunity to put in a few principles or rules of engagement or a little bit of something. So in this instance, Larry's got people resting and he's talking about the shoulder and what it is. What do you think the shoulder is? Where is the shoulder is and where it isn't? What are the parts that make up a shoulder? So you can do that, but knowing that it can take people a bit out of their experience, and that could be a good thing, because you want them to engage them, or it could be what you don't want, because you want to drop them right into an ATM and you don't want to distract them with wisdom and or patter. So that's where you kind of, if you know what you want from the class, then you know what to do. My suggestion to you is to play around with it. So if you've got a compulsion to keep talking in the breaks, like I had, and I had a trainer, a colleague who said, okay, break the compulsion, break the habit. So now I can do it both ways. And that's the trick, that you know when to do it or not. Okay, come back up to sitting, because you've all gone to lie down, which is fine. See how it takes you out of yourself if I do a lot of patter in between? It really disrupts the lesson, which could be a good thing. Okay, and have your legs crossed if that's comfortable, and lean with your hands behind. Now, if I use the word lean, people give a lot of weight to their hands and it's probably not sustainable. So I probably wouldn't use the word lean. I just have your hands behind you. They can take weight if they need to. They don't have to. Yeah. So the language here is quite important. And now as you take your right shoulder forward, take your left shoulder back. And as your left shoulder then comes forward, take your right shoulder back. And when do you know when you're in the neutral or the starting position? How do you pass through that particular train station, like the home station? And what happens to your attention when these two different movements that you did separately now come together? What does your brain do to connect two movements actually into one movement? There's quite a clear signaling change in the brain in terms of what's firing to do this movement, even though the two movements you've done before, but when you did them separately, it's very different now. What's your experience of it? And if you can't remember how it's different from moving just the one shoulder consciously, voluntarily, you can go back and experiment. Now, as teachers, I can't necessarily see the difference between this movement, the alternate shoulder coming forward and back, versus the individual. It's a very experiential thing, because I can't necessarily see your attention. So I have to give you time to feel it. Sometimes as you get more experienced, you can see people's intention a little bit more. There'll be maybe a clarity, but it's a bit of a conceit that you can see somebody's attention. You're projecting a bit. Can you track both shoulders? Okay, just rest in sitting for a moment. God, you're all so patient. I can't bear it. I can't bear it. Okay. You are freaks. You are freaks. No, the public would not sit so quietly for so long. I couldn't bear it. It was me. Oh, I don't know, minutes, hours. So how long is a rest? Who asked that question? Yeah. I couldn't bear it. So it's all about me. You and I were having and I was winking with Jenny. So there was 3 of us who couldn't bear it. The rest of you are such good people that you just sat there and you tolerated a really long rest. Some of you really liked it, probably. But so how do we know when a rest is too long? Partly it's you, like me, the teacher. But one of the reasons that I could see that people were kind of going, what the hell, is that there was starting to be more fidgeting. People started to do something else. I could see some people almost going into meditation. Some people were just zonked out. And then people started fidgeting. Yeah. So I can't see where your mind goes, but your bodies start fidgeting. Now you were, like I said, a bunch of freakazoids where a lot of you actually just sat there really still and quiet. The public won't do it. They won't sit there that long. Oh, it's a couple of minutes. I don't know, hours. I actually didn't time, but it was much. Did you all know? Did you all just know she's doing this on purpose? Oh God, so obvious. All right. So you were just out waiting me, weren't you? I've gone completely off you. How did you know in yourself it was too long? Yeah, well, you were lying down. That's why. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a bit of a chatter. Yeah. So silence is good. Too long is uncomfortable. So your mind just went onto your shopping list? Pidget, right. Yeah. Getting uncomfortable. Yeah. So how do I know that? Because a lot of you didn't fidget. That's why you're unusual. The general public would have been fidgeting a lot earlier. Yeah. Yeah. But not such a big deal. Yeah. It's true. It's true. But I haven't given you any silence and you just sat there in silence for yonks. So you are unusual. You have to understand that now, that you're not good normal students. You are really different. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all down to me. Yep. You are only here because I created you. They're just an illusion, Jen. Only odd now. So when you're practicing these things at home, test yourself about, because silence for me is quite difficult, actually. That's why it was really good when I was an assistant trainer that I had, mentors and other folk who would challenge me. Like, I've told you before, I used to have to teach ATMs with no patter, only silence, nothing extra except the lesson, or no jokes, or only theory, or only this, or only that. So you can set yourself these disciplines to challenge yourself so that you can do it different ways. It's really, really interesting. I wouldn't necessarily do that straight away, but you start to notice what your habits are, and then you challenge your habits. It's really fascinating. Okay, come back up to sitting. This lesson's going to take bloody forever. All right, I think we might just go not do anything meta anymore. That's not a problem at all. We in this room, we almost never, because there's a series. We stop when people have had enough. We very rarely stay on script because you can, because the lessons keep going. You just bring them to some kind of natural conclusion. And you do that by coming back to a reference movement or a test movement. That's how you close it off, if you want to know the trick to that. Okay. All right. Now lean on your hands again behind you, or take some little, whatever weight you're prepared to give to your hands. So this is your decision, all right? This is the self-responsibility stuff. What's sustainable with your hands, by your sides or behind you or somewhere on the floor. And now let your head hang back a little bit. So again, this is your decision about how far back is safe. And try it a few times. Just let your head go back a little bit, and we're somewhere where you're happy to let it stay there. And so your head is somewhat back, so your eyes are somewhat towards the ceiling, and they can be closed now. And now begin again in this position, bringing your right shoulder forward and the left shoulder back. Come back to the front. And what's the difference now with your head back? What's the arc of the eyes or the nose through space as you bring your right shoulder forwards and your left back? And what's the shape of your spine with your head back like this? And what happens to the space between, say, your right ear and the right shoulder as your right shoulder goes forward, and the space between the left ear and the left shoulder as your left shoulder goes back? And now complete the movement so that the left shoulder, when you get back to the sort of neutral or starting position, your left shoulder continues to come forward and your right shoulder goes back. So now you're going both ways. And does your head respond to these movements in the same way in each direction? And can you breathe? And if you can, do it. Breathe. If you can't, stop the movement. And what's this changing in the distance between your right shoulder and the right ear and the left shoulder and the left ear as you go, as your head is turned to the left and turned to the right? So here's where the starting position can make the movement more or less obvious. If you can, just take your hands further behind you for a moment and do the movement and see, let your head hang back. And maybe you can only do it for one turn, but just to see that with your hands further back, even though it's more demanding on your system, actually it can make the head hanging back a little more easy because your whole trunk is going back. And therefore this changing relationship between the right ear and the left ear and the shoulder and their respective shoulders is a little bit more obvious. Yeah? So if I allowed you to continue to have your hands either not behind you or in a way that's really comfortable, so by your side or something, then the chances of you getting a sense of this relationship are less. They're less. The chances are less. The distinction is less. So that's, again, I have to make a decision about the compromise. So because I could see that some of you, that relationship thereafter about the ear coming closer to the shoulder and then the ear, and one ear coming closer to the shoulder and one ear going away from the shoulder, that relationship wasn't clear to you, then I had to go back and stop the compromise because people weren't necessarily getting it. But maybe you were because it was really subtle, but I wasn't seeing the clear change in relationships. That people understand what I'm sort of saying. And now you come back, and if you don't have your hands there and you have your head hanging back and you turn your shoulders, you'll feel the relationship without that constraint of your hands being back, maybe. But it's not as likely to be evoked. So we're always playing with the probabilities and the possibilities. Yeah. Okay, line your back. So I guess what I'm saying is that this process of adapting, like what are you prepared to compromise on or not, ultimately comes down to how well you understand the lesson. Now, that makes you feel maybe a little bit like, oh, fuck. Like I really have to understand the lesson if I'm going to be a good teacher. Well, yes, you do. But remember, these lessons work if somebody reads them out of a book. These lessons work if somebody just puts the tape on and does no adaptation or anything. They still work. So don't get too hung up on the detail of adaptation, provided people are comfortable. They'll get what they get out of it. You know, like if you're a really responsible person and you feel like you're responsible for everybody's learning, this level of detail will drive you crackers because it will tap into your I'm super Mrs. Responsible. That's not helpful. So you've got to let that go as well. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. And it occurred to me after I was teaching here in January that, you know, it is marvelous, isn't it, that we let you into our heads so that you can hear our thoughts. But it's not necessarily helpful because these are just my thoughts. If Jenny came and taught this lesson, her thoughts would be very different. Zoran's would be very different. So if you think that my thoughts are gospel, God help you, because they're not. They're just my thoughts. Right? And I have some expertise, but it's not to say that it's the right way. You know, it's just another way. And that's what we were trying to do in the break, is to give you several different frameworks so that you can understand that you will develop your way. You know, I'm not expecting you to develop my way. This is just my way. That's the problem with expertise, is if you use me as your gold standard, well, like I said, God help you. You're in trouble. I'm not the gold standard. I'm just a possibility. Come back up to sitting. And find that position where you kind of get the reason for the hands being behind you, but you don't compromise to the point where you hurt yourself. So you find for yourself that position of compromise between having the idea of it, but without putting a strain on anything. And it's the same thing now with letting your head hang back. What feels comfortable? And what happens to the length of your spine, the shape of your spine, to let your head hang back? What happens to your chest? Where does your chest bone go in order to allow your head to hang back? And can you get a sense that it can kind of find a place to nestle back there where it still feels safe? That's it. Okay, now just let your head hang back a little bit and let it just roll a little bit. So how would your head roll so that one ear came closer to one shoulder and the other? And to do that movement, so now not thinking about the shoulder so much, but thinking about the head rolling, as if you wanted to find a place where your ear could rest on your shoulder or in the vicinity of. how would that happen? And what are your shoulders doing to allow that to happen? That's it. Now, here's where you need to understand a little bit about the possibilities for this movement, is that this has quite an impact on your vestibular system. And we'll maybe talk about that in a few days. What is the vestibular system? But you are basically, you've got these little spirit levels inside your head full of fluid. You are giving those little spirit levels a seriously good flushing with this movement. Because your head is tipped back and your head is rolling, this is a very unusual position, and your vestibular system is being stimulated in a way that it's not used to for most of you, not all of you, but some of you. So people can feel quite dizzy with that. So if you're feeling dizzy, that's absolutely understood, and you just go smaller and slower, or you do it in your imagination. Okay, just the same as you're taking care of your wrists and your shoulder and everything else. If you're feeling a little bit dizzy, you can give people the advice of doing it with their eyes open or their eyes closed. In my experience, 50% of people get less dizzy with their eyes open, and the other 50 get less dizzy with their eyes closed. So people have to figure it out for themselves. It's true. It's true. So you just give them that option, but simply acknowledging it is important. Okay, and now add in the shoulders forwards and backwards. Yeah, that's it. So the heads and the shoulders are moving together in a way that makes sense to you. So the plane of the face kind of stays back, and it's really just this, it's like your ear just goes more to one shoulder than the other. That's it. And look, how about this for an idea? How about breathing? How easy is it to breathe with your head hanging back and rolling? That's it. Good. And leave it and rest. Rest on your back. So what's the influence of this movement on your sense of self as you lie on the floor? So we've been doing it fairly symmetrically, actually. So maybe there's not such a difference between left and right. If you're doing a very one-sided lesson, you'd really ask people to scan, and note and contrast the difference between left and right. But this is a fairly symmetrical lesson. So that's probably not going to change. But maybe it does for you. You don't know. You don't know. And some people are rolling their head, which would be a really good little reference movement, because there is something changing along the length of your spine. And often that will manifest as an ease in the way the head rolls. So that could be something that you could take people's attention to. Now, with that, because this is a demanding lesson, and if some people are feeling dizzy, if people's dizziness doesn't stop when they lie down and kind of ground themselves, then this is just a general rule, I would say to them, do this in their imagination. So if the dizziness doesn't go within a few seconds or minutes, then I think that they've probably done enough. If they have a little bit of dizziness when they were doing it and they feel up for it, and the dizziness goes when they rest, then you can be, mildly encouraging about them continuing. But ultimately, it's up to them, and you have to engage them in that decision making about, if they're familiar with dizziness, this won't bother them. They're used to it. If they haven't had any dizziness ever in their life, this will freak them out, and you just need to explain to them a little bit about the vestibular system, which again we'll go through, and how ultimately this is really good for it, but it's rusty. Okay, so if that pertains to any of you, you make that decision. You can lie this one out or come back up to sitting. Same configuration, but this time, if you haven't already swapped legs over, cross them the other way, just for something completely different. Clearly, this has a massive effect on the bladder. Not just you. It's like, I think half the group has just gone out and had a pee and come back in. And I'm, under normal circumstances, I would think that that's the end of the lesson, but bugger you, I'm going to keep going because I'm in control. So again, with your arms behind you and the hands behind you. And now think about this, the pattern that you did kind of spontaneously, and whether, so as your right shoulder came forward, was it the forward shoulder that the ear got closest to? Yeah, and the backward shoulder that the ear was further away from. So that's the most common pattern, but you could have had it the other way around. You could have had it that your head rolled towards the back shoulder. So whichever way you did, do the opposite. Yep. So for most people, as they have their head back, the head goes closer to the forward shoulder. The ear goes closest to the forward shoulder. Now try and do it so that the ear goes closest to the backward shoulder. So do what you did first and see what it was. And then do the opposite. And this will make people feel confused. So expect people to get a bit frustrated and futz around and look unco, right? Because you're asking them to come out of something that's logical for them. So you have to be very reassuring, and that means that maybe they do it smaller or slower or do it in their imagination, because they might not have noticed which they did. So how's that to reverse the pattern? Just rest a moment in sitting if you haven't already. Okay, this time in sitting, let's do something different. Bring the soles of your feet together so they're not crossed, but it's like your feet are praying. Some people like to have a little bit of something under their knees for this, FYI. Okay, and have your hands behind you somewhere that's comfortable. And find that position of your trunk that allows your head to hang back. And begin this movement of your head gently going to one side and then the other. So the plane of the face stays roughly towards the ceiling. So it's not a turning of the head, it's actually are rolling, so that the right ear comes towards the right shoulder and then the right ear comes towards the left shoulder. And so for most people, as the right ear comes towards the right shoulder goes a little bit forward. So do that. As the right ear goes towards the right shoulder goes a little bit forward. Yep, that's exactly what you're doing. And then as the left ear goes towards the left shoulder, the left goes a little bit forward. That's it. That's it. And now as the head rolls a little bit to the right, could you, instead of coming back to the back position, keep it going forward so that it rolls, so that your nose goes down. That's it. So it sort of rolls past the right shoulder. So as your right ear rolls towards the right shoulder, keep the head rolling forward. Don't let it roll back. That's it. So you roll kind of past. That's it. So your nose, and that's it. And then your left ear goes, you come to the middle. That's it. The left ear goes to the left shoulder, and then your head goes into the back position. So you're making a full circle with your head. No, your nose will make a circle that's kind of, depending on where your head started, it will make a circle. The nose will make a circle. But you're thinking about the ears, the right ear going to the right shoulder and then keeping on rolling forward. And then the left ear, if you keep going, rolling forward, then the left ear will come to the left shoulder and then you'll go around. That's it. Now, can you do that movement and monitor the rest of you? What is the rest of you? Is it the shoulders? Is it the sternum? Is it the length of the spine? Is it the ribs at the front? Is it the ribs at the back? The breathing? So your shoulders still free to move? Or have you frozen your spine? And pretty much all of you have now, because you're bloody Feldenkrais students, you've reversed the circle. So if you haven't reversed the circle, reverse the circle. So with the public, you would need to tell them to reverse the circle because they'll just stick it. But because you're just intrepid explorers and you get bored easily, you've already done it. Is it as easy this way? Okay, so here's the thing. What's happening in your pelvis? Have you thought that far down? What's happening in your hip joints? So your ear joints are connected to your hip joints. It's an anatomical secret. Do you have a favorite of which way to go? Good, leave it. Everybody rest, have a rest on your back. And what did you notice as you lay down? Did you notice what had stayed the same in you, or did you notice what was different? So again, I can give you some hints about what might have happened. An experienced class, and I think it makes sense. This is, those of you who've been delving into different ATMs, Feldenkrais didn't do scans in the Alexander Yanai, and there's a reason for that. Those people on the floor were his disciples, right? They'd been with him for years and years and years. They knew ATMs. They did their own scans. They did their own sorting of what to pay attention to or not. They're experienced floor fish. Your public classes may be not in that category. So you're there to just give them some little heads up, paying attention to the length of their spine. So you can go back to that original scan that I set up and notice the length of the cervical spine and the shape. How is that now for you? The length and the shape of the thoracic spine. The length and the shape of the lumbar spine. The length and the shape of the sacrum and the coccyx. And now the length of the whole spine. So what does spine mean to you now? Remembering what spine as a sort of internal concept meant to you at the beginning of the lesson. Has that concept changed? Has the image changed or not? Perfectly fine if it hasn't. So you can get this sense that the scan and or the reference movement and the test movement, they're all signposts. And the more inexperienced the driver, the more foreign the place, the more signposts. A very experienced driver, so if you're driving from home to work, you don't look at the signposts. You don't need to. You know the way. You know what to pay attention to, hopefully. You can be a bit habitual, and it might be good for somebody to point out something new because you don't see it anymore because it's so habitual. But think about these things as signposts and how much you need, as a teacher, you need to point them out or not. Slowly roll over and come up to sitting. And then keep going up to standing. And what signposts might you need to recognize where you are now? So as a teacher, I want you to be back, in the room. So if you've gone off into some fantasy land, I want you back in the room, as it were, and being able to orient around you so that you're not a danger to yourself or others. So that's it. So orienting to the space around you, the folk around you. However, I don't want you to immediately extrovert and come out and lose any learnings from that lesson. So again, so you're experienced students, so already you're taking some of the learnings from that lesson and trying it out in terms of looking behind you, for example. So that is something that maybe this lesson is good for, is orienting in different ways. And orienting above you, orienting to the right of you, to the left of you. So you see that as experienced students, you do this spontaneously. As a teacher, I watch for that, and if it doesn't happen, I give you signposts. So this is in a position, static position, and then gently, slowly start moving and notice what you notice in walking. So this is the integration side of it. What's this good for? What's this lesson? What's the potential of this lesson in terms of your functioning as a human being? Now, for some people, it's the turning. So you notice the shoulders coming forwards and backwards. I can see that. I can see your shoulders coming forwards and backwards. For some people, it will manifest as their stride is longer because they've got more rotation in their spine. Other people feel more tall. Yeah, I can see it. But I'm only guessing. Your experience is your experience. Some people, who feels more short, like telescoped. Yeah, see, you can't tell, you buggers. Everyone's different. Gosh, come on, be uniform. No, never. You won't get a class to all have the same experience. You've got to let go of that. You know, you can't predict. Who are you to predict what anybody else's experience is going to be? Abandon ego at the door. So some people are really in their eyes. Some people are really not. Their eyes are really soft focus. Some people really are aware of backwards. Some people are aware of the space between the top of their head and the ceiling. Others feel absolutely jack shit. Who feels jack shit? Who feels nothing? No change. It's perfectly fine if you do. You feel no change. You feel wonderful. You're just a... Yeah. No, you're just a perfect student. No, the perfect student feels nothing because they're a challenge. Okay, so what you might notice is that you're hungry. It's 12:30. Most of you don't need to go to the loo because you went during the class. All right, so it's a long lesson. Of course, you wouldn't teach that long because, you know, people getting up to go to the loo is a bit of a giveaway that lesson's gone on too long. But tough tits, you know, because I had to get through it. Had to. Those are the signs. You know, those are what you look for. They're really obvious. Fidgeting, toilet breaks, loss of attention. And but because you're abnormal, you didn't, you know, you just sat there. How long do you reckon you would have sat there if I'd let you just keep going? Huh?